morning, everyone. We are here at TMEA 2023, the Texas Music Educators Association Convention. Seated next to me is Mr. Kennan Wylie. Huge round of applause.
Oh.
Kennan, thank you for being here.
It's huge. I love it.
We are actually here before the convention, the final day of the convention opens, and that's why it's so quiet. And that was actually a pro tip from Mr. Wylie, and it's working out. So that's why we're getting the sound that we are getting. But Kennan, we're so excited because we got to tour Huei-Yuan Publications yesterday. We got the full tour.
The full scene.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about your first booth when you got to TMEA?
Yeah, as I mentioned yesterday, I came here after I wrote my first book, and I didn't know what to expect. I've never been to an exhibit show before, and so I signed up for a booth, and I got one little booth, and I didn't even know you're supposed to have drapery like this. And so all I had was a wooden table. Seriously, a wooden table, and there was no flooring, and I had a couple of boxes of books, and that was in 2001. And I learned a lot after that particular show. I went around and watched everybody. Everybody has these elaborate, settings and stuff. So I needed to kind of up my game. So it took a couple of years, but through some experience and trial and error, I kind of found my way.
So as you'll see in the footage of us cutting to Kennan's booth, he has certainly upgraded his game. And you were so generous to share some words of wisdom and advice as we were getting set up, because this is our first booth this year. And so could you take us back now to how you got started in music?
Sure. My dad was a band director, so I grew up with music all the time. And he was a band director in Texas for many years. And so the love of music was easy to kind of gravitate to, because I was with him all the time in the band hall, one of those kids running around all the time, banging on stuff. And so I, played through high school, and after I graduated, I went to, before I graduated, I had an opportunity to march drum corps, which was kind of weird back then, because this was at that time, not many people from Texas marched in drum corps. It was that was a strange thing.
How did you hear about that?
I found out because if you got a second, they would broadcast drum corps on TV. And so my dad would videotape these. Back then we had beta machines. Yes. And so I would watch the videos, and I loved it. I thought it was so cool. And so I got a really love for drum corps, and I found we had a contest, and we had a judge that came in that had worked with the Phantom Regiment. It wasn't Marty Hurley, but it was a snare tech name. His name was Steve Hufford, if anybody knows him out there. And so Mr. Hufford came in and judged, and I said, hey, I really want to do a drum corps. He says, well, not many people from Texas go that far up to Illinois. Long story short, I ended up making some connections, and I found my way up there, and I auditioned, and I got in. And so I marched my senior year of high school, and then my freshman year when I went to North Texas. Wow. And so that was my first kind of, experience into that world. And at the same time I was doing that, I was actually playing a lot of, when I was in high school, I was very interested in doing young artist competitions. I did a lot of mallet playing, and so I would go and audition for these. I got to play with the Austin Symphony as a soloist. I got to play with the San Angelo Symphony and some other small symphonies. And so I worked up a couple of pieces. I did the Creston Concerto a lot,
Yes, yes.
So I would play that with these symphonies. And I did this while I was in high school.
Yes, I'm putting the time, I'm like...
A lot of people don't even know this. I don't really share this with everybody, but I kind of got into that. And then I was doing drum corps kind of on the side. So this was like two things. It was like two different worlds going on at once. And then I got to North Texas, and my world changed. And I will say one thing: the reason that I chose North Texas, everybody said, "Why did you choose that college?" Well, when I went to look around at different schools, I went to visit one day at that school, and when I visited, the professor that was there, Dr. Shatroma, he said, "I'm running a little late. You can go look around if you'd like to." And so my father and I went up and went to the recital hall. They just had a concert. And we opened that door, and when I looked in that room and I saw all of these instruments, and I didn't know the names of half of them, I said, I got to go to school here. And so that's why I chose North Texas, because I had seen things I had never seen before. I saw these shiny silver pans. I didn't know what they were called. I didn't know anything. And these big marimbas that had tubes coming down and stuff. I didn't know what I was looking at. So that was easy for me to make that decision. So that's why I went to North Texas, and I studied there for 4 years and got my master's. And I thought I wanted to go into college teaching. That's really what I was thinking I was going to do. But I ended up taking a job at a school, a Marcus High School, which is in Flower Mound, which I didn't even know where that was. And it was only about 5 minutes from where I lived, but it was so small, never heard of it. And I took that job, thought I'd be there for 3 or 4 years, and I'm there 32 years later. So since I've been at Marcus, the program has grown. I mean, I don't want to say too many things about it, but we've had a lot of success, and it's all the kids. They kind of drive the program. Once we got it going, it just kind of took its own course. We've been to, I think the drumline has won I think 10 or 11 national championships,
Yes.
and we've done many call for tapes. We've played at Midwest several times.
Yes.
We've done the honor thing here at TMEA. We won drums at state. So we've had a lot of success, and very blessed and very honored to be there. I don't take any of it for granted. Never have, never will. And it operates kind of like almost a college. I mean, it has that kind of culture and that kind of atmosphere, even though it is at a high school.
Yes.
And so, I never really looked back about trying to go to a college at some point, because I realized what I had was pretty much what I would get if I went to some of these colleges, some of the smaller ones. So I'm happy where I am. I don't know how I've been there a long time. I don't know how much longer I'll be there, but I do like it there.
Well, let me provide some context for those of us who are watching from outside of Texas. I actually was born and raised and grew up in Texas, so we knew the legend of Marcus High School, even down in Houston. We would see them at competitions and we would see them play. I've since moved to California, and you mentioned that when you first got there, there was nothing there.
Uh-huh.
And the program that people see now doesn't just spring up overnight. It comes from years and years of
Yes.
building. So when you got there, did you know that teaching was the route that you were going to take as you were finishing up in North Texas, or did you want to play and teach?
Yeah, there's that moment. There's kind of that fork in the road,
Yep.
and I didn't know what to do. And I had taken some auditions to teach at colleges, and I did get a few offers, but they were going to be in remote cities.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually, when I was at North Texas, towards the end of my stay at North Texas, I started to really play a lot of drum set, and I was really interested in that. And I started to really be more interested in that than everything else at that moment. And so, I had opportunities to kind of go the drum corps route and teach drum corps and that. And what I'd say one experience that did change all that for me, and that was in the summer of '86. I did the All-American College Band at Disney. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
They don't do that anymore, though.
Yeah,
right?
they actually just stopped it this year.
Yeah.
They put it on hold. Hopefully that will come back. But it was the most memorable summer of my life. I mean, that changed everything for me. Playing music in front of people, being compensated for it,
Yes.
and not even knowing that, and working with professionals. They brought in professionals that we played with, and all the kids in the band were great. And I learned so much from maybe what I want to do long term. And so when I came back from that experience, I decided I didn't want to go teach drum corps. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to see if I could teach at a college and or play. I was living in Dallas, so there was a lot of opportunities to play. And I joined a group, a contemporary jazz group, and they were playing a lot around. So we played a lot in the 90s, like all over the place, and in the state of Texas and kind of in the Southwest. And so I did that a lot while I was teaching at Marcus before I went full time there. And so they just kind of merged together. I was able to keep playing, but also keep teaching. And so I kind of had the best of both worlds. I never fully, I didn't move to Nashville or California. I have friends that did that, and that's amazing, experience. I know, and some of my best friends are touring with great musicians and great bands all over the place, and everybody kind of takes our own path. And you got to have no regrets. Once you choose, you got to make the best of it. And I'm really happy with how everything turned out. And I see these guys, even at these conventions, I run into people that I went to school with, and they're either teaching or they're playing professionally. So we all keep in touch, and that's kind of my path, and everybody's going to have a different, and the connections that you meet and the people that you meet are going to lead you different directions. And so that's kind of a brief summary of kind of how I ended up where I ended up, but there's a lot of stuff in between, but that's kind of the major hits right there. But I didn't think I was going to be at Marcus, but maybe 3 or 4 years. I really thought I was going to get a college job after about 4 or 5 years. And that's why I went to get my master's, because I really wanted to get a college job. And at that point, you had to have a master's, and a little bit later, you had to have your doctorate to get a college degree. So I did the best I could. And I think that it turned out well for me. You know, I'm really happy with it.
I think many people would I think many people would agree with that as well. So when you get through Kennan, and for most people who are watching this, they are probably at the start of their careers.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're a band director who doesn't have a percussion specialist, or
Yeah.
maybe they're not a percussionist themselves. What are some of the things that you know now that seem just so obvious that you didn't know? It took you maybe 5 or 10 years to figure out in order to build the culture in a program like Marcus?
You got to ask questions. You have to ask questions, and you got to ask people that you respect and that you admire, and really try to pick their brain and figure out what they're doing and try to get some information, and then take the best of what you learn and make it your own. But don't, get some varied opinions, and you have to trust your ears, and you have to trust your eyes, and you have to trust, your brain. What I mean by that is, if something doesn't sound good, then you need to figure out why it doesn't sound good, and then go from, don't just think it doesn't sound good because you don't know what you're doing. It probably sounds good because it doesn't sound good. You know what I'm saying? Some people say, well, I don't know how to teach percussion, that's why it doesn't sound good. No, it doesn't sound good, and I teach percussion, and it still doesn't sound good. You're right, it does not sound good. If something tastes bad, it tastes bad. Right. You know what I'm saying? So trust your common sense. Even if you're not a non-percussionist and you're teaching percussion, you need to trust your ears. That's what I tell a lot of the people that I speak with that are non-percussionists that are teaching percussionists. I said, trust your eyes. If kids' sticks are doing something weird, that's probably why it sounds bad. Like, you're right, that doesn't look that way. If their sticks are going all over the place, if one stick is higher than the other, that's probably why it doesn't sound even if you want it to be even. You are correct. Just because you don't play percussion doesn't mean you cannot make that assumption. And like I said, try to talk to people in your area, first, and then, nowadays it was different than when I started. We didn't have all this online material like what you guys got here at Ensemble Block. I mean, that's material that if I had when I started out, it would have made things a lot easier. And we didn't have that. We didn't have any way to figure that out. We had to get on a phone and make a phone call and do that. We didn't have smartphones. We couldn't FaceTime and do all that. Everything was done via phone. And we listened to people. You had to get recordings and stuff. You couldn't. It wasn't the way that stuff is being transferred now. It's like in seconds.
Yes.
If I want to listen to a tune, I can figure it out. But it wasn't that way when I started at Marcus at all. Like, if I heard somebody had a good tune, they would have to mail me the music, and then mail me a recording or something. That's the way we did it. You know. And when I wrote my first book back in 2000, we didn't even have Dropbox. So when we shared files, we had to put them on a flash drive and then take it to somebody or mail it to them. Yes. There was none of this Dropbox and all that googly gosh. None of that existed, where you could just upload all these files and stuff. It was a different way, a different time for sure.
I've only now gotten to the point where I tell my students, there was a time when YouTube didn't exist. And they're like, oh, and then.
So with all this, technology that's available, you should be able to not only ask questions, but almost get some answers to questions pretty quick with all of this information like you guys have out and other companies. It really makes accessible to talk to percussionists almost online.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it's almost the opposite challenge now, where there's so much information out there.
That's a good point.
You're not, if you don't know what you're looking for necessarily,
you can get overwhelmed.
You might have to wade through a lot of other material before you find I just need someone to tell me, who's got years of experience, what the answer is.
Yes.
What's one of the best ways that you could approach it, and then you just go through that path. So when you're creating materials, one thing I learned from going through the booth with you was that you're teaching, you're in the classroom, you saw a problem, and then you created something to solve the problem that you're having in the classroom. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us about what that first product looked like? You wrote your first book. How did that get started? Were you scratching on a notepad in between rehearsals? Were you going straight to the computer? What did that look like for you?
It was all pencil. I didn't do anything on computer. I wrote the whole book out by pencil before I put anything up, because if I'm going to make changes and stuff, it's easier just to write it than there. I didn't really write it during class. I would write it in the evenings. And once I feel comfortable with it, it's easy for me to write. I don't mean that I don't mean that braggadociously, but I mean it was just, it kind of, when things are meant to be, it just kind of came out. I didn't really. The hardest part might have been the putting in the computer and formatting everything.
Right.
That's where it became a little bit more frustrating. And I didn't do that by myself. Obviously, I had some help with that because I was teaching full time, so I couldn't just like do this every night. I was writing the book, and then I would had somebody to help me engrave it, so to speak.
Yes.
Which means they kind of put it in a notational device and got it to come out on the screen. But as far as how I came about, I will share this one thing. When I sat down to write the book, the reason that I wrote the book is because I didn't want students to have similar problems that I had when I started playing. Like I felt there was things that I could do to help my students avoid that. And you're kind of going, what are you talking about? Well, for once, when I started playing, this was in the 80s, we didn't have Kevlar heads, we had plastic heads. And so when I marched drum corps, there wasn't a lot of talk about rebound. There was a lot of downstroke playing at that time. And when I was making that transformation from drum corps into drum set playing, when you play drum set, you have to have kind of a freer touch to the stick. And that's called, some people call that rebound, legato stroke, free stroke, whatever term you want to use. But that's not something that I had a lot of exposure to at the time I was growing up. And you're going, how did you get away with that? Well, because at the time, that's the way we played. Everything was just like in the head and really bringing it. And so I was studying with Ed Soph, who's one of the greatest jazz drummers who ever lived on the planet. He was teaching at North Texas, and Ed and I would go to my lesson, and Ed would play the cymbal. I'll get around to what he would play the cymbal, and I would play it, and it would sound totally different. And I'm like, how come I not play the cymbal like he does? And he says, because I'm rebounding and you're not. And I'm like, I know how to rebound. He goes, no, you're not rebounding. So I was in college, granted, and this was going on. So I eventually learned how to let the stick rebound when I was in college, folks. That's when I learned to let the stick rebound. I thought I knew what I was doing. I mean, I had won all these competitions and everything, snare drumming, and I thought I knew what I was doing, but I didn't know what I was doing. So to make a long story short, when I started teaching, I wanted to have a system where kids could spend a long time learning how to let the stick rebound and nothing getting in the way. So I designed my book so like the first 14 chapters, they can play and don't even have to introduce any kind of controlled stroke, because I wanted them to marinate in this rebound stroke for a long time. Yes. So that's the impetus of writing the book. And I had worked out of other books prior to that, but they always kind of got to the controlled stroke much earlier than I was ready to get to. Because when I grew up, when I went back and kind of refound my stroke, it took a long time for me. And I wanted to make sure that these beginners sat in that rebound, that universal, because that is the stroke that they're going to use on marimba, they're going to use it on drum set, they're going to use it on timpani, and they're going to use it on snare drum. It is the stroke. That's why a lot of people call it almost the universal stroke, which is the legato stroke. That defines every percussionist sound, how they play. And the control is necessary and needed and absolutely has to be there, but that rebound stroke is their sound. That's what makes their sound. And so I try to design a book that could keep my beginners in that type of frame of mind for almost like 14 lessons. Yes. And we didn't have to introduce anything.
One of the things I learned from talking to my good friend Dre, who made for this, I think, from Jeff Osnemore, where he was watching your program and you could see your 6th graders and your 7th graders and your 8th graders, and you could really see that progression. Everyone was full rebound. And for some teachers, they might get nervous and I'm not teaching them how to control the stick and control the rebound and downstroke. But you really see that by 6, 7, 8, it gets a little bit more controlled. But by 9th grade, rebound is at the front of their mind, but then they're able to control. I really think you just have to be patient, and you'll see the I know what he's talking about. We did I think that was a clinic we did in 2002 or something like that, right when the first book came out, and I brought some 6th and 7th and 8th graders, and you could see what we do. You could just hear the maturity from each year, how it was going. And so when we do rebound for 6 months, and then we start downstroking, there's a little flop that's kind of going on, but that flop starts to go away after a couple of months. But the benefit of doing this is by the time they come to the high school, when my snare drummers can play keyboards, and they sound really good playing the keyboards, and my keyboard players can play snare drum, and you can't tell the difference. You can't tell the difference between the kids. And I mean, it's just,
The payoff is when they come to high school and you hear them play in a percussion ensemble. You're like, wow, the sounds they're making, they sound really, really good. And I think that has a lot to do with starting them early with this universal stroke, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And letting them just marinate in it and just sit in it for a long time, because it's not easy. You can't say, hey, this is a rebound stroke, all right, let's go to the next chapter.
Yep.
It does not work that way. It's just too important, and it's in my opinion. Now, some people may feel different, that's okay, but for me, I think the success of my program at Marcus, that has a lot to do with it. It has a lot to do, and I'm not saying the book, but I'm saying the way that we spend so much time on one of your guys, that Bill Bachman, who I'm sure if you're an Ensemble Block follower, you know who Bill Bachman is. And we've been very lucky to have him work at Marcus for the last, I think, 12 years. And we're like two peas in a pod when it comes to drumming. I mean, like, we agree on a lot of things, probably 98% of everything.
Oh,
you know,
we'll check with Bill.
Yeah,
100%.
there's always something we don't agree. But he's always made the comment, like, the kids rebound so well. Like, it is a stroke. Like when they play buzz rolls and stuff, it sounds, you know, the way I think everybody would want to hear it. Yes. You know what I'm saying? So we're really happy with that. And we do, at Marcus, we do a lot of percussion ensemble playing. And I know that indoor percussion is very popular. We just don't do that. We have such an ensemble-based spring. And one of those things about that rebound stroke is that it really captivates that part of the year and really they're able to express themselves so much better because they have that ability, like to stick rebound. Yes. You know, and so we don't do the getting off that subject real quick. We do an extra drum show in the fall, so that's kind of our indoor season is the fall, and we do kind of do double time. Yes. So we kind of get the same thing, but unfortunately not in the spring.
And so at the program, one of the things that, this is from an outside perspective, is Marcus is known for being super well-rounded. You see the kids play and they're smoking on the field, and they get in the concert season, they're smoking in the percussion ensemble, and you've got mallet players, and as you said, you can't tell the snare drummers from the mallet players and vice versa. One common thing you hear from band directors all the time is like, oh, my students, well, I'm just a snare drummer, or I'm just a xylophone player, or my kid doesn't like to play mallets, my kid doesn't like to play snare drum. Do you have any advice for those teachers and how they can help reach their students with that?
It's a mindset. It really is. And the teacher can lay the groundwork for that. This is an example. I was just sharing this with a attendee here yesterday. We were talking about, how do you get the kids to, play mallets more? And I said, I'll give you an example of what we do is when we pass out the beginners, when we're at the beginner level, because that's where you start it. It has to start that first year. You got to get them appreciating what the keyboards are. You let them know when you walk in the first day, hey, this is percussion class. It's not drum class, it's percussion class. So we're going to do all kinds of percussion instruments, and we're really going to focus in on drumming and mallet playing this first year. And that's something that we're all expecting you to be able to do, so to be able to participate in our bands after this year. And as we get going, like for instance, when we get ready to play a band piece and there is a mallet part, well, when they come, I give the mallet part to all the students. Everybody gets a copy of the snare part, the mallet part, and what other parts there are. And when we start practicing, we all practice the mallet part together. And then I say, whoever can play the mallet parts gets to pick what they want to play. And they look at me and they said, well, why is that? If they can play the mallet parts, shouldn't they play the keyboard? I said, no, they can already play keyboard. So they're going to play something else. And you guys that can't play the keyboard, you're going to practice the keyboard. So it works every time. I mean, I've been doing this for like 30 years, and sure enough, everybody practices the mallet parts because they want to play snare. Yeah. So you have to kind of do things like that. You could come up with your own ideas, how you want to do it, but it's really, I think it's the approach of the instructor, whether you're a non-percussionist or not. You just have to cultivate that, and it has to be something that you don't favor one or the other. As a drum instructor, sometimes that becomes the case because the drum instructor is doing 5 days a week on the pad, and all of a sudden at the end of the first semester they want to learn how to play mallets. Well, the kids are like, no, I want to play the drums. We do this all the time, and so all of a sudden you've built that culture where they don't barely play any mallets. Yes. So you kind of have to balance it out. And that doesn't mean you have to do snare, mallet, snare, mallet, snare, mallets, but you do need to balance it. You have to have some sort of balance. And if you're going to drum, then maybe if you don't want to play keyboards, have them do theory assignments so they can kind of keep that part going, so you know that they're thinking about theory and reading notes and stuff like that while you're still drumming. And then when you make that transfer, you're ready to go. And people aren't like, maybe rebelling or something like that.
So with the creation of your books and the materials that you've created, very humbly can I say that the prolific stage of your life.
Oh, thank you.
You've created so many materials for the teachers. And
hopefully more to come.
Just tremendous amount of a body of work. You recently moved into this video side of things.
Mm-hmm.
You told me a little bit about the work that you were doing over the pandemic.
Yes, so when we had the pandemic, I had the opportunity, obviously a little extra time. Didn't have Friday night games or Saturday competitions. So something that I had been wanting to do, and through being at these exhibits for the last 20 years, I get a lot of people that ask me, how do you do this? What do you do when this happens? When do you start rolls? When do you start plans? And all that kind of stuff. And so I always thought it would be good for me as well. I wanted to have all my stuff documented, like kind of what I do, and like if I ever stop teaching, I want to know what I was doing when I was teaching my beginners. Like what did I say? What was I doing? And I figure if I stopped teaching and I did it, then I might forget some stuff. So I wanted to do it while I was teaching. So what I decided to do was, with that extra time I had during the pandemic, I kind of built a little studio in the back of my house, and I was able to just kind of at my leisure video. And I started from like day one, and I kind of did it as the year was going on. Like I started it maybe 2 weeks before school started, so I was kind of timing this with like what we were doing. I finished before the end of the school year. I didn't take the whole school year. It took me about 4 months to record all of it because there's like 72 videos. And so I start from the very beginning of it. The whole curriculum is kind of what's laid out in my book. It's not something, the video is not a direct, like, use this and my book together. You can do that, and it's great because all of the examples are taken from my book, but you don't have to have the book to get from the video.
Right.
a lot of the benefit from it. So I start from how to set your pad up to holding the sticks to how to set up whatever, and we go through all the basic everything that I do with my beginners. I mean, it is literally everything that I could imagine I tell my beginners.
And as someone who's seen the videos, it's almost as if you're in the corner of the room watching Kennan teach his beginners. And so your infectious energy, the enthusiasm that you bring to your students, that all comes across in the videos.
Yeah, and one of the things that I do every day in class is like, every video starts with us warming up. So I put on the metronome and we warm up, and I give tempos, and it's just like I do in my class. I mean, because if you don't do that, you need to see how that develops and hear it. And if you really, if you're patient enough, and this is where some educators kind of lose it. They don't stick with it, If you're patient and you watch all the videos, you'll see like the incrementation, and it's not that much. It's not like going from 0 to 100 overnight. It takes some time, but if you stay with it, you'll see by the end of the video that we're really playing pretty good. Yeah. Like it's really, it's kind of happening. Now I must say, this isn't something that I expect all of our beginners to be able to do after 1 year. I mean, you could use the videos and you could spread it over a 2-year period. I'm not going to sit here and say that my kids are playing drum set, all of them. The drum set stuff in there is kind of almost bonus material for kids that like to play drum set, that maybe, they would like to learn a little bit more about it, because, we only have so many days of in the year. But when it comes to the snare drumming and the keyboard portion and the timpani portion, I mean, a lot of that we do cover in class. And there's a lot of stuff about auxiliary stuff. A lot of band directors don't even know how to hold the tambourine, so watch the video. I mean, it's very, very, it covers all of the basic, simple stuff that you need to know, like different mallets to use on the timpani, or how to tune the timpani, where to play on the timpani, how to set up concert toms, how to hold the claves. I mean, just everything. It's got pretty much every instrument that you would have in your average middle school band hall, and then some extra.
And even though that information might be over here, over there, you've packaged it so nicely. It's sequenced as if the beginner is moving through the curriculum step by step. It is, and it's real. I mean, it's very organic in that way. You know what I'm saying? It's not
it's not a over slicked production. It's just organic. It's me talking to you and talking to your kids. Sometimes I'll say, hey, you in the back, make sure your fingers are on the stick, or whatever. I try to make it as real as it could be. Like that was the whole thing. I wanted it to be unplugged. I wanted it to be real. I wanted it to be me just saying what I say. And you may not like some of it, you may disagree with it, and that's totally fine. But at least you have something to go off of, because I can't tell you how many times I've had people, I can't even count how many people have come watch me teach beginner classes. I get a lot of, can I come watch it? Sure, anytime. And so
people who are driving hours and taking flights to go to Marcus specifically to watch Mr. Wylie run one of his classes, or usually it's when they come out, they stay for the day, right?
Yeah, I usually stay for the day. Yeah. And that's fine. I love that too. But this is what this is about. I figured, why don't I just record kind of what I do? I mean, you don't do that exactly in class. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of what I do. Yeah. Like, it's pretty much, if you see me teach class, that's what you're going to see. Yes. Like, it's not much different than how I teach my class. I mean, maybe some kids raise his hand and say, I got to go to the bathroom. Right, but other than that, it's...
Forgot my sticks, Mr. Wylie.
Yeah, I mean, there's always things that kind of come out, but it really is a very realistic way of how I teach my kids.
Yeah. And with the production of these videos now, what is your hope for band directors and students now?
Really that, that they can find the answers to their questions a little easier. And hopefully, the instructors that are educators that aren't percussionists are the ones that I really hope we can touch them, because bless their hearts, some of them are in very rural areas and they don't have any access to a percussion instructor. We're very blessed in Texas. Texas is one of a kind. There are other areas in the country that are similar, but it is, sometimes we take it for granted in Texas. And when I travel to other places, it's not the same. And they have a lot of questions and they need answers. They need assistance, and we need to find a way to get them some real easy ways to get answers to their questions. It may not solve the problem, but I think it's going to make them feel a lot better about what they're doing. And hopefully it will help in some way. I mean, I don't ever expect a non-percussionist to educate maybe as well as a percussionist. I mean, that's asking a lot. That's asking me to teach the trombone as well as a trombonist the trombone. But maybe I can find materials that are going to allow me to be a more effective trombone teacher. You know what I'm saying? And that's what we're trying to do with percussion. And percussion is a different beast, as we know, than the wind instruments. It has its own, entity. And a lot of wind players, they struggle with it, and who are teaching percussion, and we're just trying to make it a little simpler for them. You know what I'm saying? Yes. It's not as complicated as maybe I think they get so intimidated by it. I'm just trying to make it a little more friendly and a little more simple for those people. And I'm hoping that stuff like these videos and stuff can make them feel that way. That's what I hope.
We're so thankful and excited to be partnering with you, Kennan, and working on your latest video series.
Yep.
And if you're interested in learning more about how you can access, make sure you check the description down below, ensembleblanc.com. Get your learning on. As if you're a teacher, get in there. If you're a student, get into the classroom with Mr. Wylie, because you're becoming snare and mallets and making sure that you're a well-rounded percussionist. Kennan, thanks so much again for coming by. Have a great rest of TMEA.
Let's get it done.
All right, thank you guys.